as I was driving home yesterday from the Sister Spirit retreat where I was in Saratoga Springs. And I heard about yet another shooting in the synagogue close to San Diego. Yesterday morning at the end of Passover. And I immediately texted some of the rabbis here that we're close to at Temple Bethel. And you know, it's at moments like this where we have to stay upstairs. I really want you to hear what I'm saying. This is not the time to get into the doom and the gloom. That now is the time to stand in the solidarity and the upliftment that says we will not be overcome and we will not be defeated. This rash that we've been seeing literally all over the world, whether it's Christian churches or Jewish temples or Islamic mosques, the way that New Zealand has responded to me has been a model of how you do this. So the Prime Minister comes out and definitively denounces the hate. No mincing words, but stands in the solidarity. Says, we were not chosen because we're racist. We have been chosen because we are so diverse, and we are not going to stop. In fact, we're going to double down. And when she called for the National Day of Mourning, it started with Muslim prayers. Broadcasting all over New Zealand, 5 a.m. And when the memorials happened, all of the women were coming with their heads wrapped in the show of the solidarity. If you let yourself get into the panic of the victimization, you've already lost. I want you to hear what I'm saying. You've already lost. When I was growing up, I'm at the end of the baby boom, we used to have to do all these drills because we were at this nuclear arms race thing with Russia. And we didn't understand it, we just accepted it as life. The fallout shelters, and you get underneath the tables in case the bombs come, and all of the rest of that. And it's not bombs now, it's information warfare. And when I look at how divisive we become, sometimes I wonder, are the Russians already winning? If the idea is to disrupt our harmony and pit us against each other. It's like, now's the time, if we really want a democracy, to stand together, even if we don't agree. Now is the time to stand together in the agapeo, oneness, love, whether I like you or not. See, seeds of possibility, the topic today, a seed is only as good as the fertility of the environment that it's placed in. A raw seed just sitting there on the shelf isn't going to grow. For the seed to grow, it has to be planted, but it's not going to grow unless it's planted in some kind of a fertile soil. So it's our job not to try to manufacture the right seed. It's our job to make sure that we are the fertile soil. I want you to catch that. Too often, we're trying to come up and create the perfect elixir, so to speak. Our job is not so much to create the perfect elixir, but to be the perfect setting for the right elixir to do its thing. We don't have to figure it out. We don't have to be the ones to come up with all of the answers. Our job is to stand in the possibility consciousness and know that there is an answer. See, when you pray, your prayer is not to convince God to bring you your answer. The answer you've already come up with. The idea of your prayer is to set aside all the things that you think that you know, good or otherwise, and open up a space in consciousness that allows for possibilities that you don't know. Feel the difference in that? I'm not here trying to make God my genie. And I'm going to wooze you up, and you do what I tell you to do. When I tell you to do it, how I tell you to do it. No, the universe doesn't work that way. Because whatever you see is too small. You only know what you know. You don't know the potential. You don't know the power. You don't know the possibility. You don't know all of the connective dots. You don't know all of the other people who are looking for you. The good you seek is seeking you. So when you pray, you are recalibrating. When you pray, you are shifting the vibration of your frequency. See, there's synergy. All energetic things are vibing off their similar frequencies. And I know you can feel that in yourself sometimes. Can you feel how you might go down to a lower vibration of judgment or worry or concern or lack, where you get caught up in it? More and more I hear people saying, you know what, I'm laying off of social media for a minute. I'm laying off of it because it's too distracting. I'm calibrating down instead of calibrating up. Spirit keeps moving at higher and higher and higher frequencies. And when things keep moving at higher and higher and higher frequencies, they become less visible to the natural eye. What we see here in matter is vibrating at lower and lower and lower frequencies. So when we have conditions, I don't care what that is, cancer or anything else, in our mind's eye, we don't want to keep solidifying it in a lower vibration. We keep recalibrating ourselves up and up and up and up that allows the density of that stuff to melt. It's almost like what happens with an ice cube or water. When you lower the temperature of the water, it freezes. When you heat it up, it becomes more fluid, it becomes more water, and then it can move around a little bit. And you keep heating it up, it vaporizes, and you can't even see it anymore. This is what happens with us. When we slough off this body temple, when we go on to the next dimensions, when we quote-unquote cross over, we're vibrating so high, we're vibrating at a frequency that's so great, it's not contained in a body anymore. It's like the vapor that you can't see, but it's there. It just doesn't look like water or ice anymore. And no matter what it is, whether it's a physical condition, whether it's a social thing that's going out there in the world, whether it's something on the collective level, our job as spiritual beings is to hold that highest watch, to keep going up and saying no matter what form it is in now, that's not permanent. This too shall pass. No matter what form it is currently in, it can always shift and change. And it's not our job to predetermine what all of those forms are. That's not our job. In my mind now, I am hearing a parable. When I do metaphysical Bible interpretation, this is one of the seminal ones. This is one of the ones that I do the most. And parables are kind of like Eastern koans, like the Buddhists, like what is the sound of one hand clapping? They're meant to make you think. They're definitely meant to make you think. We don't really know a lot about Jesus' life. We know a little bit about the birth in terms of what shows up in Scripture. The next encounter is like this brief little thing, probably about bar mitzvah time, 13 years old. And then we don't hear anything until he's 30, back on the scene. And then that ministry is just 3 years, crucified, resurrect, out. That's not a lot. That's not a lot of time. Birth, an incident at 13, and then 3 years. That's not a lot of time. So there's all kind of speculation about, well, where was he? What was he doing? And most scholars really believe that somewhere between that 17 and 30, he probably was east in terms of his teachings and the things in which he was saying, and at the nativity where the folks from the east were looking for him, like the wise men from the east following the stars. It's like they knew somebody was there that they were to connect with, and that whatever that connection was that was happening at birth, that something was going on there. So he taught by these different ways. He taught by miracles of his life, these teachings, and by these parables. This parable, the point of this one was so important, it was the only parable he interpreted. He never interpreted any of them. He always left them up to you to figure out what in the world is he talking about. But all of the parables are true on multiple levels. They're true physically, literally true, but they're also true metaphorically. They also have a message in them. So if he talks about building your house upon the rock versus building your house upon the sand, yes, that's literally true. If you build a house upon the rock, it's more likely to stand, and if you build your house upon sand, it's literally true. But it's not just a construction lesson that's happening here. There's something that's trying to be said about life that's relevant to you. So this particular story is parable. And we refer to it as the parable of the sower and the seed. And as the story goes, it says the sower went out to sow his seed. Now, the seed fell upon these four kinds of soil. Now, in all of the parables, everything stands for consciousness. Everything. Everything is a metaphor. Every action, every person, even the terrain, the weather, all of it. So if there's a story about a water in the boat and the storm, it's like all that represents something. The wind, the rain beating upon the house. It's not just about the weather. It's about adversity. It's about stuff that happens to you. So in this thing, it says the sower goes out to sow the seed. And these seeds are ideas. In this metaphor that he's using here, he is comparing the soil to the seed, our mind to ideas. That you plant seeds in soil, and you plant ideas in your mind. And trying to show that it's the same thing that happens regardless of which arena that you're in. And that's one of the things that I loved about his teachings, is that he didn't teach stuff that was in the particular, like a particular religion, a particular this. All of his examples were just about life. Just about life. And things that anybody could get because it was relating to your life, because he was busy teaching everybody from different kinds of traditions. So he's saying that the sower goes out to sow his seed. He says the seed falls in these four kinds of terrain. He says the first seed falls upon the wayside. He says the birds come, snatch it up. It's gone. He says the second seed falls upon the stony places. He says that seed grows up, sprouts up really quickly, then it shrivels up, and it dies. He says the third seed falls among the thorny places, the thorns and the thistles. He says that seed also grows, but it gets choked. He says the last seed falls upon the fertile ground, and that seed grows tenfold, hundredfold, thousandfold. So let's break this down. Each of these soils represent different states of consciousness. The seed that falls upon the wayside, that would be like, dun, 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 boom, and it just falls, and you keep on walking. Okay. That seed's not gonna flourish as much because it wasn't planted. But what do you have to do to plant? You got to move something. You got to dig in. You can't just drop it there. You have to make some space. Are you with me? You got to move something, and you got to churn it. You got to move it around a little bit. Now, if the earth had nerve endings and feelings, I don't know how happy it would be with this planting thing. I'm just saying. Broke open. You get impacted. Dirt gets impacted. But you got to break in there. And you got to put something in there, but then you got to cover it back up. So think about that. You got to create some open space in your mind, because the seed that wasn't planted, says the birds, gone, picked it up. It would be our equivalent of in one ear, out the other. If you don't plant it somewhere, like within, you can't hang on to it. You can't hang on to it. We hear a lot of stuff that doesn't get planted. We are bombarded with information and stuff like all the time, and it is in one ear and out the other because we didn't make any space to hold on to it. Okay? Another word for this kind of consciousness might be closed or unavailable. He says the second kind fell upon these rocky places. So to really understand the metaphor, you need to understand the terrain which the people that he was talking about knew about. So this area where Jesus is, it's very hilly. Many of the gardens were terraced. There were a lot of rocks. And sometimes they would bring in dirt just so they could make gardens and stuff and like put it on top of the rock. Sometimes the rocks were left in for like water retention, or like retaining walls, so that stuff didn't wash wet. So the coat of soil that's on top of these rocks is very thin. It's a shallow depth of soil. So what would happen is that the seeds there did grow, and they grew very quickly. It says, but they were scorched and shriveled. So what would happen is that the heat of the sun would heat up the rocks underneath. And the roots, having no place to go, no other dirt, would butt right up against the hot rocks. So they would be scorched and they would shrivel. Fast grow, fast dry, because it's shallow, because it has no place to go. Sometimes I refer to this as the metaphysical trap. That a lot of us in this tradition have this kind of soil. We get just enough principles, we get just enough ideas, we get just enough to plant some seeds and start making some stuff grow. And then when the heat is on, because we haven't cultivated the soil enough, we haven't removed enough of the rocks and the stuff underneath to make the space deep enough for the seed. We plant a little bit of space. Woo, isn't this great? Ooh, I'm manifesting this and I'm manifesting that, and this thing is happening, and then all of a sudden, it all seems to dry. What happened? This stuff doesn't work. These seeds are fake. Fake seeds. It doesn't do all what it's supposed to do. Yeah, it worked for a little while, but then the seeds stopped working. The seeds stopped working. The seeds had no place to go. There was no fertility there. The soil wasn't there to be able to do something with it. So you've got closed consciousness. You have shallow consciousness. You haven't created enough space. So when the heat is on, when the adversity comes, all that stuff that's underneath is going to scorch it. That's how it is with us all the time. No matter how much affirmations and stuff that we're doing, if we don't go deep enough with it, then the stuff, the rocks underneath, the emotions, the sadness, the resentment, the fears, or whatever that stuff, false beliefs and paradigms that we're holding on to subconsciously, subjectively, winds up having the last say. Those deep-seated things. That's why we got to keep at it. As I started off this message saying, it's like the deep-seated racism, the deep-seated sexism or xenophobia or religious animosity. That stuff is deep-seated. That's some serious rocks up underneath there. And we can't just put on little shallow soils of democracy or little shallow soils of inclusion or little shallow soils of interfaith when we got all these rocks. It grows up for a little while, but then when the heat is on, it shrivels up. We got more work to do. We've got more work to do. He says that some seeds fell among the thorny places. These are weeds. He said they grew, but then they got choked. So when you're cultivating the environment to plant your seeds, you got to weed. When do you weed? All the time. You can't just weed in the beginning to make your little spot plot here great for this little seed. You got to weed all the time. Why? Because the weeds grow faster than your plants. Listen to what I just said. The weeds grow faster than your plants. And the seeds of the weeds are blowing in the wind. You don't have to hold yourself so personally accountable for all the weeds in your garden. How did those weeds get there? Because they're blowing in the air. That's how they got there. You're not accountable for the weeds that are in your garden, just the weeds you don't unweed. You're not accountable for the weeds that are in your garden. You're just accountable for the weeds that you nurture and that you feed. Thoughts are like the weed. Thoughts are communicable. They're blowing in the air. You cannot control them. They are in your garden. You are not a bad gardener because you got weeds. What did I do with my consciousness? I prayed so hard and I did all my affirmations and I just don't understand it, man. I did this, I cleared it out, but here it is again. And here this stuff is again. Something must be wrong with these seeds because these seeds did not clear out all the weeds. The weeds are going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. And your plant will grow. But you know what? They eventually got choked. They eventually got choked. This is a lot of what's going on in this nation. A lot of our foundation is planted in weeds. And we've been trying to grow a democracy right in the middle of a split nation, where we allowed the infrastructure to be split from the beginning. Talking about liberty and freedom and all that, and building in a system where some people have all rights and some people have absolutely none. As part of our system and compromise, knowing that was never going to work, but kicking the can down, founding fathers even saying it, they know this isn't going to last, but somebody else is going to have to deal with it. Well, guess what? The can has landed. It has been kicked as far down the road as this split thing can go. And we're having to call the question now about who we're going to be. Who are we going to be? And if our vote is to be the promise of the seeds of possibility that our creeds say, we got to become more fertile soil. We got to create a bigger space in consciousness that allows that to happen. It says some fell on the fertile soil. And the fertile soil, it multiplied. It's receptive. It's nurtured. The roadside, the stony places, the thorns and the thistle and the fertile seed, the fertile soil. I personally use this as a litmus test. When things are not manifesting in my life the way that I would like them to manifest, or I feel like I'm not stepping up to my promise, I have to ask myself, what am I being here? Am I really as fertile soil for what I say that I want? Okay. Or am I trying to manifest in the middle of all my weeds? You know? Am I being too shallow with this? Where I haven't dug out and really dealt with some of that stuff that is underneath, that gets agitated and hot very quickly when things aren't going right? You know? Or have I just been paying lip service? Have I done any of that? I personally get trapped more in the thorns and the thistles, where in my general kind of live and let live mentality, sometimes I let stuff go on way too long than what it should have before I take real action and weed it out. I can hear my mother's mother in my head now. She passed away when I was 11. But I can hear her say, "Nip it in the bud." I didn't understand really what that meant. I mean, I knew she was telling my mother, you need to stop this. That much I knew. But I didn't have appreciation what nip it in the bud meant. It's like before this thing even starts to flower, you need to cut this out. I knew when she said nip it in the bud, she was telling my mother, you're not doing enough to handle whatever you need to be handling. You need to take action. That was clear. But the sort of immediacy of the proactive stance, I was missing that. And I can hear her now. But unfortunately, by the time I hear her say nip it in the bud, I already got weeds. Joking about playing. So I'm a try to listen to Grandma Harriet a little earlier. That beautiful song that we were singing earlier, Let It Be. Mother Mary, comes to me. And I always thought it was about, like, Mother Mary, like St. Mary, Jesus' mother. But apparently, his mother was mother. His mother was Mary. And she had died when he was a child. And that was his own mother, Mary. Lennon, that was Lennon, right? John Lennon's mother, Mary, who was Paul. Was it Paul McCartney? No, it's John. Yeah, I always, with their songs, sometimes I mix up who did which one, because they strike me. Okay, it was Paul's mother. Okay, Lennon McCartney's song. Yeah. But there is that place within each of us that's asking us to do our part. Our part is not to try to get more seeds. Our part is not to try to coerce the seed. My mother used to tell this story in church about this little boy who was out in the garden early, and his mom couldn't find him. And he's all dewy and wet, and he's out there, and she says, "What are you doing out there?" And he puts out his little chest, and he says, "I'm helping God." Helping God, what are you doing? "I'm opening up the rosebuds." And that's what too many of us are doing. We're busy helping God. God don't need all that. Universe doesn't need you to open up the rosebuds. That's not your job. That's not your job. Our job is to make sure that we're fertile enough. Our job is not to crack the seed open and pull the stuff out and pull the roots in. But how many of us are trying to do that? How many of us have seeds of possibility? And we're busy trying to extract out of it the fruit. I know there's fruit in there. Come on now. Instead of trusting that there's a divine order here. Trusting that the seed knows what it's supposed to be and how and when. And to respect the integrity of the seed that has its own timing, that has its own sense of order. And it's our job not to try to get it on our timetable, but for us to cooperate with it. Not every seed can blossom anytime. Listen to what I'm saying. Not every seed can blossom at any time. I love fresh peaches. But Christmas isn't the time. But I'm not going to starve. There'll be something else growing. Are you with me? Yeah. So it is with your life. We have seasons. And just like with the garden, it's this season, and then it is this season, and it's this one, and it's that one. you're going to be fine because the right thing is going to grow in the right season. So you got to be willing. If it's winter for you, be winter. And maybe it's winter for one thing and spring for another in you at the same time. That's okay. That's okay. The main thing for each of us is to be that fertile soil. Do our work. Dig up some space. Make some space in consciousness. Do our job to keep it supple, to keep it fertile. Don't keep opening it up to see if it's growing. That's going to kill it. First the roots and then the fruits. Before you see anything topside, something has to happen underneath. Don't be impatient. Don't be impatient. You can't show everybody what's happening underneath. You can't show everybody what's happening in your consciousness. You know you're healing sometimes when there's nothing out there to prove it. Don't get discouraged because you have nothing to prove. Don't deny what's going on with you inside just because it's not evident topside. You know. It's a feeling. And something comes over you. Something comes over you. I personally have never been pregnant, but I would imagine that it's kind of like that, where you can feel something's happening in me. Before anybody else can see it, you know that something's happening. Yes? Let's be that fertile soil. So when you see things going on, before we're quick to judge, just ask ourselves, what are we being? Individually or collective consciousness? Are we the roadside? Are we the thorny places? Are we the stony places? Or are we fertile? And I guarantee you that you're going to get a lot further in life cultivating your capacity for the fertility than you are of trying to find the right seeds or to manipulate the ones that you have. That's a promise. Let us pray. As we turn within in this moment, there's something that's happening. We can't even name it. It's too precious and it's too infinite to define. But we feel the spirit of life itself moving through us. Something's calling us up and something's calling us out. Something's saying, come up a little higher. Something's reminding you you are not your stuff. Something's saying there's so much more than what meets the eye. Don't be fooled by what you see. Something is saying, be still and know who I am. That something is nearer than our breath, closer than hands and feet. It's our own essence revealing itself. And we say, thank you. In this moment right now, we surrender all. We let go of the fights and the struggles. We let go of the ought tos and the shoulds and the expectations. The vision board, the agendas, the timetables. We release that as much as we release the fears, the worries, the concerns, the doubts, the judgments, the resentment. All those places where we're stuck. It's never too late. I'm seeing in my mind now a woman I spent some time with yesterday who left the retreat for a couple of hours to go see her father, who she didn't realize lived just 15 minutes away. None of her siblings, all 7 of them, had not seen him in 30 years. No contact. And to hear the story when she came back. It's never too late for healing. It's never too late for divine order to take place. It's never too late for right action. So in this moment right now, we let go of all the stories that we have in our heads about why not. And we're calling it all forth. We're calling forth the healing. We're calling forth the wholeness. We're calling forth the prosperity and the abundance. We call forth the guidance and the direction, the trust, the truth, the courage, the possibility. We call forth our faith, our strength, our serenity, our balance. We call forth the compassion, the reconciliation, the forgiveness. We call it all forth. Because it all exists simultaneously. And we're not just fertile soil for some, but not fertile soil for another. We're fertile soil for all of it simultaneously. The health, the wealth, the love, the power, the peace, the joy, all at the same time. This prayer we're praying for ourselves, we pray for everybody, everywhere. Everywhere, that all needs be met. For divine right companionship, security, safety, food, shelter, clothing, education, creativity, opportunity, community, freedom to worship, everywhere. And I say thank you, God, for watching over this ministry. I say thank you for the revelation of our new home. As we release this property into its greater yet to be, to do marvelous works. We know that that place that you would have as our dwelling place, as our home, it's here. You've already promised it. And we say thank you. Thank you. Right order, right timing. It is good. We get out the way. We allow it to be. And so it is.